Hi everyone, Helen Blunden here at Activate Learn on Twitter. It is time for another book review, and this time round I have an Australian classic by Joan Lindsay called Time Without Clocks. It was written in 1962, and you may not be aware that Joan Lindsay is a famous Australian author, an Australian writer, and in fact you may know her as the author of the book Picnic at Hanging Rock. Now, you may have seen that 1970s film, of this strange film of the girls in those white uniforms at the turn of the century going into Hanging Rock, which is a place here in Victoria that has a lot of rocks. It's a picnic area, rocks, rocky outcrops. But back then, somehow mysteriously, they all disappeared. Well, Joan Lindsay wrote the book Picnic at Hanging Rock, but this book, Time Without Clocks, is really an autobiography of her time and marriage to an Australian artist by the name of Daryl Lindsay. Now, Daryl came from a long line of artists from the Lindsay family in Australia. They're very, very famous, in particular Norman Lindsay, and their artworks are scattered all around the world. But she married Daryl Lindsay on Valentine's Day in London, and this is a recount of their life together, going from London and also back to Australia. Now, you can imagine two very freewheeling, very independent people in the 1920s. Now, these people were artists. They used to hang around with artists, with writers, with politicians, with singers, opera singers, you name it. And it's kind of like a recounting of the story and the people that they meet and the people that come to their place and their home. And it is really just a lovely recollection of all those stories and the time of what Melbourne would have been like in the 1920s and 30s, just before the Great Depression, where things were really going well. And also she does account for some stories during the Depression where they too didn't go unscathed with it. So this book, Time Without Clocks, the reason why she makes reference to time is the fact that she's someone who's quite unstructured. She doesn't care about keeping time or being on time. And in fact, she mentions that clocks don't seem to suit her because they all seem to stop when she's around. And she had this sundial that was cracked, and she looked at it and thought that this actually personifies their life, that we don't need to have our life by the clock and through the clock and everything determined by the clock. And you could see this in the life that both she and Daryl enjoyed by letting things go with the flow, enjoying the seasons as they happened, enjoying life in Mulberry Hill, which was their house that they bought in Langwarren, which is a town in the southeastern suburbs of Melbourne. And she just kind of enjoyed life. She really enjoyed the small details in life. And reading this was really wonderful because it gave me an idea of what life was like in a small town of Langwarren, or Baxter as it was then, and what people got up to on Saturday nights to go out to a dance hall. There's a lot of community. There's a lot of people helping each other. There was people coming in and out of their homes. They had lots of visitors who would help them around the house. They had other artists dropping by and painting with Daryl while she would use the space to write her books. And it was very much a very idyllic artist's residence, if you could call it. And it kind of reminds me of, I guess, Leonard Cohen had Hydra and all his other writers and poets and singers and artists who would come to Hydra to be inspired by a place that had time slowed down for them. Well, this is actually kind of similar, but it's happened in the 20s and 30s in early Melbourne, if that makes sense. So I'm actually quite glad I read this book at this point in time, because it makes me appreciate what life was like in the past, and how sometimes I would say, yes, it was a simpler time, but these people appreciated art and appreciated life and appreciated not living their life by the watch, by the clock, and just enjoying life experiences and the people who would come to their home, and the stories that they would share, the drinks they would drink, the things that they would get up to. And it was as if time had slowed down and they were just really appreciating the moment. I also love the fact that you got you got some real insight into some people like Dame Nellie Melba, who would just visit these people. Also Keith Murdoch, who is the father of Rupert Murdoch, knew Joan Lindsay and Daryl Lindsay as well, and he would be a visitor to their place. Look, so this book is really a recount of her recollections of the 1920s and 30s, of a simpler time, and a wonderful time spent with her husband, building up and creating Mulberry Hill, which is their home. Now, Mulberry Hill, I checked into this, it is listed by the National Heritage Council of Victoria, and it is open to the public at certain times, and it's kind of just half an hour away from my place. So I think it's time for me to go and visit Mulberry Hill and actually find that pedestal there, the broken sundial, and then see what life was like for Joan Lindsay in Time Without Clocks. So thank you for listening, and thank you for watching. Bye for now.